Good day and welcome to Yoga Dharma TV again. My name is Fran Thompson and this is Alex Arnold. We're both very experienced yoga teachers and we're bringing you a series of 4 videos on the Ashtanga Vinyasa series. This is to demonstrate to you the intelligent use of postures and that the yoga Ashtanga sequence, the Chikitsa sequence or therapy sequence, is for just about anybody, and if all you take away from it is the breath and some of the holding work, and that's all you're able to attain for it, that's more than enough. We'd like you to follow each video carefully, make sure you're practiced in it before you move on to the next, and if you have any questions we're more than happy to receive comments from you in the comment box below. So, Alex, make sure you're seated comfortably and we should begin. So we're going to commence with a breath called the Ujjayi breath. This is the victorious breath and it's the victory of the breath over the mind, the body and the spirit. So it's a very raspy sound that happens whilst we're practicing this breath. It occurs by constricting the throat very slightly. So Alex is going to raise her first 2 fingers of the right hand and place her fingers in the pit of her throat. And that will enable her to feel what's going on in the throat. So I'm going to ask her to close her eyes now and start to breathe in and out through the nostrils, allowing her nostrils to flare a little bit as she breathes in and to contract a little as she breathes out. Okay, so as she breathes in now, I'm going to ask her if she can slightly constrict the throat. You should feel her fingers draw back towards the pit of her throat as she breathes in, and as she exhales, pushing the pit of the throat towards the front of the room. Breathing in, allowing the pit of the throat to draw all the way back towards the back of the cervical spine, the back of the spine at the neck, and as she breathes out, pushing the throat forward towards the front of the room. Now this creates a very raspy sound, a little bit like snoring. So now as she breathes in, I'm going to ask her to lift the corners of her mouth very slightly and lift the corners of her eyes. And as she breathes out, I'd like her to relax the corner of her eyes and to relax the mouth a little. So breathing in, she's still activating the throat but lifting the corners of her mouth and the eyes. And as she breathes out, relaxing the corner of the eyes, relaxing the corners of the mouth and allowing the throat to dip back. She wants to remain as upright as possible, so the back of her head sitting over the sit bone. Now she can release her hand but carry on with the breathing, but just taking the left hand to the upper chest, so the thumbs are just beneath her collarbones. So you can see if the upper chest starts to lift as she breathes in and relaxes as she breathes out. So the upper chest lifts towards the ceiling as she breathes in and it drops back down as she tries to breathe out. Now at the moment there's social distancing, but if you're at home you can work in pairs and you could place maybe one hand on the front of your partner, one hand on the back, because If you have one hand between the shoulder blades at the back, you're able to allow the shoulders to expand at the back of the body as you breathe in and to contract as you breathe out. If Alex turns her back to face the camera, then people can see that movement. So she breathes in, you should see her shoulder blades separate. That's wonderful. And as she breathes out, they relax. And this is something you can practice, as I said, in partners at home if you wish to. So now we have Alex facing the camera. So she's going to bring her right hand just on top of the lower part of the rib cage. So her little fingers engage with the lower rib. She can just push down very slightly on the lower ribs so they don't flare up too much as she breathes in. So as she breathes in, she's going to push her rib cage into her hand, but slightly ease that left side down. And again, you could work this in partners, so you could work the hand either side of the ribs. So she's still practicing that Ujjayi breath. The breath is still raspy. It's that slight snoring sound. And then she'll just swap hands. So she'll release the right hand and bring the left hand down. And she's just easing that right side down so it doesn't flare up too far. Otherwise we tend to get very tight diaphragm when we move on to the next stage. Okay, you can relax there, Alex. So we're now going to start to move on to expressing the bandhas within our body. Bandhas are locks or they're seals within our system. They're quite light within the Ashtanga Vinyasa series. They can be a very strong hold and they can assist us when held in a seated position towards meditation. But we use these for stability. Of course, within meditation you would also use bandhas for stability so that you don't fall asleep and rock backwards and forwards. They also take us to a different stage of consciousness. Whilst we're practicing Ashtanga Vinyasa, they're used for stability and assistance within the posture. Okay, so Alex is going to start by activating Mula Bandha. So this is our root lock. Now, the root lock could be likened to the pelvic floor lift in Western medicine. With ladies, we tend to activate the central passage, okay, or lift the cervix. With gentlemen, we tend to concentrate on the prostate area. Strictly speaking, if you're practicing the front passage or the back passage would be a Srini Mudra, the front passage would be the Droli Mudra. So we're working towards the central passage, really. So the way I like to do this, is no easy way of talking about this, is to imagine or visualise that we're on quite a long journey, okay, and you're on a coach or a train or a car journey, and there are absolutely no toilets anywhere and you cannot get off. It's a motorway, so there's no getting off. So you've got to hold your pelvic floor, okay? So you're kind of visualising you're holding a wee, okay, or stopping the flow of urine, okay, but you're using the central passage, okay? So the only way I know to feel for this without it being a strictly private affair is to place your hands on your hip bones and then slide your fingertips in about 1 inch, okay? So use your first two fingers, Alex, okay, and press fairly firmly. Fantastic. So now Alex is going to breathe in and lift her pelvic floor, activate the pelvic floor, and if her pelvic floor is actually working, because it doesn't work on all of us, some of us have a lot of issues around the pelvic floor, you should feel those ligaments tighten. They're called the inguinal ligaments. Okay, so if they're working, you should feel them tighten under your fingers. You're not activating your tummy muscles. This is purely the pelvic floor, a lift of the central passage, or as I say for gentlemen, the perineum or the prostate, really, you're lifting. Okay? So some people find this exceptionally difficult. For those, you might find it better to lie down on your back. So if Alex could lie down on her back now. Now, you can place a cushion underneath your tailbone. That helps you tilt your tailbone very slightly, or just tuck your tailbone like Alex did. Alex, could you relax again and then tuck again? Okay. If you find pelvic floor work particularly difficult, it definitely helps to place a cushion between your legs. Okay. But if not, you could just try here without the cushion. So you're going to breathe in, start to very slightly scrunch the toes. Imagine squeezing the thighs together very slightly. And then as you exhale, you're going to relax. Breathing in, scrunching the toes, squeezing the thighs together very slightly, pulling up that pelvic floor. And exhale, relax. Now once more, just place your fingers in that same area, Alex. 1 inch in from the hip bones. And see if that's working for you. Breathing in, scrunching the toes, activating the arches of the feet, squeezing the inner thighs very slightly. Wonderful. Pulled up that pelvic floor, higher, 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 higher. And exhale, relax. Okay, I think that's working well for Alex. But as I say, you can use props if you need to. Some people need to place their feet upon a book or a small block to get it working. There's many methods you can use. You could try having your feet over 2 little roller balls. That sometimes helps to get the arches of the feet active. Okay, sometimes it's very difficult if we're quite flat-footed. Okay, if after a month you're still not having any success with activating the pelvic floor, it might be worth seeking medical advice. Okay, so I'm going to bring you into a seated position again now, Alex. Okay, we're looking at the next lock or bandha, and this is Uddiyana Bandha, or it's called Uddiyana Bandha in Ashtanga Vinyasa. It's often called Nabi Bandha in other practices. It's the lower belly lock. Okay, so we can visualise this lower belly lock a little bit like an ice cream scoop coming along and scooping out that lower belly. Okay, so she's going to breathe in still and activate the pelvic floor. But as she breathes out, she's going to pull back and up her lower belly. It should draw up and back. So she might be better turning to the side for you so you can see. Okay, so if you lean back very slightly, Alex, and bring your hands down by your sides. So breathing in, pulling up those pelvic floor muscles, squeeze, and exhale, lift the lower belly, scoop that lower belly back. Breathing in, pulling up the pelvic floor muscles, and exhale, lift that lower belly up. It's called the flying up lock, so it does feel like the little birds flying up inside your tummy. Breathing in, activating those pelvic floor muscles. Exhale, lift that lower belly. And one more, breathing in and activating the pelvic floor muscles. And as you exhale, lifting up or scooping up that lower belly. Okay, so if Alex was finding that difficult, again she could lie on her back. And again she could place a cushion just underneath her tailbone or tuck her tailbone. Okay, and you can see the minute she tucks her tailbone, her tummy naturally scoops up. So that's a lot less work. Okay, if she wants again, she can place blocks between her knees. So as she breathes in, she's going to activate the pelvic floor. So scrunching the toes and pulling up that pelvic floor, those ligaments are tightening. As she exhales, she's going to scoop up that lower belly. Watch it go. That's excellent, Alex. Breathing in and activating the pelvic floor. And as you exhale, scooping up the lower belly. And breathing in and activating the pelvic floor. And as you exhale, scoop up the lower belly from the pubis bone underneath the rib cage. And then exhale, release, relax. Okay, we'll let Alex have a little wiggle of her lower back to relax the back. She's worked very hard. Okay, so the last bandha we're going to look at is Janandhara bandha. So this is a very slight action when we're practicing the Ashtanga Chikitsa series, or the Ashtanga primary series. It would be normally known as a full lock. So you'll quite often see in books Janandhara practice, okay, with the chin tucked in fully towards the notch in the chest. So Alex will demonstrate that. And the pelvic floor lifted and the lower belly lifted. That's Janandhara bandha. But we're practicing a much simpler version for the primary series. So when you were practicing your Ujjayi breathing, as you breathed in, your throat slightly constricted, and as you breathed out, throat eased forward towards the front of the room. If this time, as you breathe in, allow the throat to constrict still, so draw back towards the back of the neck. But as you breathe out, very, very slightly, lift the back of the head and tuck the chin. So it's hardly anything at all. Breathing in, allowing the chest to swell, drawing the pitch of the throat back, exhale. Looking down very slightly, and you'll find a slight restriction at the throat. So it's a very, very, very gentle lock. Now, if the minute you turn your eyes down, you notice your pelvic floor drop, you know something's wrong. If, as you turn your eyes down and your nose tucks in very slightly, you feel activation at the pelvic floor and the lower belly, you know you've got it right. Okay, so now we shall move on to standing. So in this posture, you can see with Alex's feet apart that her spine is able to drop freely and easily between her legs. There's absolutely no pressure on the base of her spine, and it's in a natural and very relaxed position. Also, her hips are able to align with the ankles and the feet, so there's no strain on the hips at all. Okay, so now if I bring Alex's feet together, so ask her to bring her feet together, the minute she brings her feet together, there's a little bit more pressure on the spine. Now, in one way, this is a good thing because her glutes are starting to activate now and the lower back's starting to activate, so we're creating strength and posture in the spine. However, if you're someone with a very tight spine or with abnormalities, maybe you've been driving long distances, maybe you are sat at a desk for long periods at a time, then first of all you need to be able to relax that spinal position before you start to put any pressure on it. So for most people, I advise you to stand in Tadasana when you very first start the standing sequence. Also, you can see with her feet together, she's putting more pressure on her hips and on her knees. So with her feet apart, everything's much more relaxed. Okay, so she would be in Tadasana, so I'm going to get Alex to face the side of her mat now. Okay. So in Tadasana, I'm now going to ask her to rock backwards and forwards onto her heels. So she can start to get a sense of her centre of gravity. Slowly coming to a standstill. Placing pressing her heels very firmly into the mat and then spreading her toes wide. She's going to try and lift the inside of her legs to activate the arches of her feet. Now, of course, the more she activates Mula Bandha, that's that pelvic floor lock we were just working on, the more she's able to activate the arches of the feet. It's very important she keeps her big toes and her little toes on the floor and is aware of spreading the toes wide. She also wants to make sure that her kneecaps are engaged. So it's very common within yoga to have locked kneecaps rather. Okay, that's exceptionally common because flexible people are often attracted to yoga. However, that's not ideal for the knees, or the hips or the spine. Okay, so if your students' kneecaps are locked, if your kneecaps are locked, just bend your knees very slightly, like you can see Alex is doing. Alex actually doesn't suffer from locked knees. But bend the knees very slightly and then tilt back in the buttocks, so the buttocks are sitting over the top of the heels. And then you've got to try and work your toes down. Okay? So from there, we're going to roll our shoulders forward towards the front of the room and then roll them back again. Rolling them forward and then rolling them back again, holding the shoulders rolled back. Now very slightly start to drop the rib cage, okay? Because at the moment Alex's back is overly arching. She needs to create space in the shoulders, so dropping the rib cage and creating space in the shoulders. Absolutely wonderful. And now is the stage she needs to start to Ujjayi breathe. So deep Ujjayi breathing at the pit of the throat and exhale pushing the front of the throat towards the front of the room. Inhale drawing the throat back, exhale pushing it forward. Okay, so as she inhales, she's going to activate the pelvic floor. As she exhales, she's going to slightly tuck her chin and look down towards the tip of the nose. And as she does that, she might find her lower belly scoops up naturally. If not, on the exhale, she'll also have to consciously activate that lower belly lock. And I will repeat that again, that's called Uddiyana Bandha. So it's a very slight movement with the eyes, hardly any movement at all. Now the other thing that tends to happen is the back of the head tends to tip forward slightly from the shoulders. So we now need to get Alex to really lean back into an imaginary wall. So you can use a wall to practice this. I would suggest that you start by getting your shoulders and your buttocks in line with the wall and then your lower back. And then work the back of the head into the wall and then slowly work the heels in line with the back of the head. And you'll gradually come to a beautiful straight standing posture. Also, as Alex exhales, she wants to slightly visualise pushing her fingers into the floor. So now on to Samasthiti. You've become a master at Tadasana, and so you now decide that it's time to practice full Samasthiti. So at that stage you bring your feet together and your heels touching, your toes touching, and you try and get your knees to touch. You might have to take your knees in and out to the side very slightly to do that, because one kneecap tends to sit over the top of the other. Okay. So now we're going to activate the front of our quadriceps and the inside of the thighs. And again, work on the position of the head, so the head sitting directly over the back of the shoulders over the hips over the calves, and the calves over the heels. Roll the shoulders and then roll them back again. So roll the shoulders forward and then roll them back again. Check they're nice and open. And we've achieved our wonderful Samasthiti. So thank you, Alex, that was wonderful. And we shall now start to practice our sun salutation. So Alex is in her wonderful Samasthiti position, her breath well established, her bandhas active, okay, and she's preparing to move towards her sun salutations. It now becomes very apparent why the Ujjayi breath needs to be of the same length on the inhalation and the exhalation, as each part of the breath leads our movement. Now, traditionally, as we start our sun salutations, the arms would rise as we breathe in, and then we'd fold forward and touch the floor as we breathe out. However, we need to get used to this movement, so we just start in standing, raising the arms up and down. So inhale, drawing the hands up and towards one another. On the tail of the exhale, release the hands down by your sides. We do that a couple more times, Alex. Breathing in, drawing the arms up and to touch. Exhale, hands back down by your side. If it pains your shoulders to bring your hands to touch, then just apart. Inhale, arms up and maybe just apart. Exhale, hands back down by your side. Inhale, arms up. Feeling those trapezius muscles active. Exhale, hands down by your side. Now, as you breathe in, the drushti or the gaze starts to come up towards your hands. There's no need to move your neck very much at all, because it's the gaze that moves up on the inhale, down on the exhale. So very little movement with the neck. Breathing in, drawing the arms up and overhead. Keep those shoulders depressed, Alex. Exhale, release the hands down, gaze down the tip of the nose. Inhale, arms up. Drushti or focal point. Exhale, hands down. And one more. Inhale, drawing the hands up. And exhale, gaze back down towards the tip of your nose. Okay. This time we start to fold forward. So as we breathe in, we draw the hands up and overhead. And as we exhale, we fold forward, arms wide. Take the arms back very slightly. That allows the weight to become quite even and balanced on the body, and place the hands down. Okay. You'll notice that as Alex folded forward, her knees were bent, and this is very much to protect her back. As she becomes more practiced, her legs will become straighter as she comes down. Breathe in. Alex, bend your knees, come up to standing, just like you would if you were picking up a box. Exhale, hands back down by your sides. So again, that may not be appropriate for you. You may have to have your hands on your hips as you fold forward. So it may be inhale, arms up for you. Exhale, folding forward, arms wide. Take the hands to your hips to support the hips, to support the bandhas. Fold over your fingertips. Back is really nice and straight, absolutely flat. And then release the hands down to touch the earth. Well done. Relax the head, relax the neck. From here, we're going to breathe in and look forward. And exhale, come back down onto all fours. So stepping back with the right leg and the left leg on the exhalation. Lowering those knees down. Take an in-breath, lift the tummy. From here, Alex is going to exhale and lower the chest down towards the floor. Come onto her tummy by pushing her knees away. And then breathe in very carefully, lift the front of her chest. Try not to overwork her neck. And then exhale, come back down onto the floor. And then from there, breathe in and push the hands into the floor, knees, toes, and come into a cat position, an all fours position. Well done. And then she can sit back on her heels on the next exhalation, so the breath leaves the movement back, and lower head down. This is very challenging for some people. Some people may need blocks between the bottom and the feet, but it may be suitable for you. From there, Alex can breathe in and turn the toes under, light on her hands, hardly touching the floor. Lift her bottom high towards the ceiling, and then step forward with the left foot and then the right foot towards her hand. exhale, fold. Breathing in, drawing the hands up and overhead. And exhale, hands down by your side. Now that was a reasonably simple version of sun salutations. Some people may need to take it slower than that. If you need to take it slower than that, there are other videos on our YouTube channel taking sun salutations much slower. But this, if you're going to practice the primary sequence, should be fine for you. However, some of you may need to work a lot harder than that, okay? Maybe already quite practiced. So, we shall start again in our Salasiti, re-establishing the position, working all four corners of the feet into the mat, activating the arches of the feet, kneecaps, thighs, Mula Bandha, pelvic floor, Uddiyana Bandha, lower belly lock, and tucking the chin in very slightly for our Jalandhara lock. On the inhale, we draw the hands up and overhead. As we exhale, we'll fold forward with a flat back to touch the floor. We breathe in and look forward. We exhale, step back into a plank position. Right leg, left leg. Tuck the tailbone under. It's very common for the bottom to rise. And then exhale, lower down from there towards the floor. Can you see Alex's back is absolutely flat? From there we can roll through into a back bend, into upward dog or into cobra with the thighs on the floor. So a much stronger version of cobra. And then from there we can start to bend our knees, lift our hips and ease our way into downward dog. Okay. Now when you first start downward dog you may be very rounded in the back. So Alex, could you just ease your back towards the front of the room? Okay. If this is the case, I'd like you to walk your feet right in towards your hands. Okay. Lift your wrists away from the floor so the roots of the fingers are just on the floor and you establish that beautiful forward bend. Doesn't matter how bent your knees are. Alex could bend her knees so much more than that. Okay, you might find after weeks that the hamstrings start to lengthen and the buttocks start to give up. So you can start to walk your feet back very slightly further back. Now the heels may need to be very much lifted away from the mat in order to practice that. Can you lift your heels right up? Okay, so her back's still flat but the weight's on her wrist. So she's got to lift her heels up and push her bottom onto an imaginary bench behind her so the weight is off her wrist. So bend your knees, Alex, and push your hips back. That's it. And relax the heels. She's becoming better at it. So now she could walk her feet back even further. So now she's in much more of a traditional downward dog. Arches of the feet are active, the inside of the legs are active, thighs are active, pelvic floor active, and the lower belly active. And if you look at her gaze, she's tucked her chin right in now towards her navel, towards her Navi Bandha. Okay, as she breathes in, she's going to look forward, and then she's going to step forward. Exhale, fold down, look at the knees. Inhale, sweep the arms wide to come up to standing. And then exhale, hands down by your sides. Okay, so this time we're going to work even harder. So stepping forward to the front of your mat, Alex. We would traditionally practice 5 sun salutations. So whichever version's right for you, you practice 5 of those. So inhaling, drawing the hands up. Exhaling, arms wide, touching the floor. Inhale, looking forward. Exhale, jumping back. Lower. Inhale through into your back bend, gaze towards the brow centre. Exhale, tipping back into down dog, looking towards your navel. Establishing that in 5 deep breaths. Spreading your fingers wide, bending your elbows and opening up the space between the shoulders by wrapping the shoulders around the armpits. Allowing the ribcage to expand as you breathe in. Contract as you breathe out, lengthening the waist and easing the hips towards the back of the room. Lifting the front of the shins so you're smoothing the flesh away from the ankles. and activating the arches of your feet and the inside of the legs. On the next in-breath, lift your hips and float forward. Exhale, fold. Inhale, draw the hands up overhead. And exhale, hands back down by our sides. So that commences our sun salutation A. Enjoy. Try to practice 5 at a time. Keep the postures well established before you move on to the next phase. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comment box below. We thank you so much for your assistance today, Alex. You were wonderful, and we hope to see the rest of you soon. Bye.